Next up is another treat from amongst the many treats that we've had over the course of the morning. Next up is a fireside chat with a longtime supporter of AABDC and co-chair of the 7th annual AABR, Ann Chow from AT&T Business CEO. Ann is the Chief Executive Officer of AT&T Business, responsible for a $36 billion operating unit. The first woman to hold this position and the first woman of color CEO in AT&T's history. You better recognize. Thank you. As a founding member of AT&T University's governing board, Ann actively supports the company's leadership development imperatives. She's involved in many AT&T employee groups and serves as the executive sponsor for AT&T Women of Business Employee Network and the Asian Pacific Women's Organization. Her many contributions to business and the community are widely recognized. Most recently, Ann was named to Fortune's 2020 Most Powerful Women in Business list, and she is a recipient of the 2021 Outstanding 50 Pinnacle Award. Ann will be interviewed by Tihua Chang, investigative reporter, TYT Investigate. Tihua Chang is an investigative reporter, recipient of numerous awards, including the 1996 prestigious Peabody Award, 2004 New York Press Club Award, and 2005 Edward R. Murrow Award. Very active in Asian American community affairs, Chang was both a national and local New York board member of the Asian American Journalists Association, AAJA, which gave him a Lifetime Achievement Award in 2015. A graduate of the University of Pennsylvania and Columbia University's Graduate School of Journalism, Chang was named one of the 10 most influential Columbia alumni in New York City. His relentless investigative reporting, which I have been witness to having grown up in New Jersey, led to significant changes. I encourage you to read both of their bios in the program. Please welcome to the stage Tiawa Chang and AT&T CEO Ann Chow.
Oh, you want to do that?
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
better.
yeah, yeah.
Okay. You're the boss.
I don't know about that. I'm a little nervous.
Don't be nervous. I promised John I'd be nice.
And you know, I don't think I've ever been interviewed by an investigative reporter, so. All right, and Randall, I'm with you. I'm a Jersey girl, so I watched him my entire childhood and life. This is a thrilling moment for me right here.
You grew up watching me, right?
I did.
That's good.
I did grow up watching you.
Just remember, Asians don't raisins, so you don't know how old I am. So.
I know. Yeah, that's right. Asians don't raisin. Hashtag. That's another hashtag, by the way.
Well, by the way, just for transparency, I'm no longer with TYT.com. I'm a freelancer. Ann.
Yes?
I think if I were in this audience, and especially if there are a lot of young people here, I think that one thing I'd want to know since you were a female of color who's a CEO of I read 35, but apparently $36 billion corporation, and just very simply, what do you believe were the keys to your success? Because I was reading at one point that you said it wasn't easy, that when you tried to get into the sales department, you were rejected 5 times. Talk to us about keys to success. And if I could, I had interviewed or talked to Michelle Wu, the mayor of Boston, and I asked her, every time I went to Boston, I had a lot of racist confrontations with white guys in Boston. It's changed a lot, apparently, and I said, how did you get along with them? How did you proceed from the city council all the way to be mayor? And she smiled and said, 1, I always chose my battles, and 2, I was always the best prepared. And she smiled and said that she was always happy to know that whenever any opponent in the city council knew she was coming, they would tell their staff, you better prepare, Michelle's coming. So what were some of the keys to your success?
Yeah, so
That's
thanks.
a pretty easy question,
Yeah,
right? I mean,
it is. It is. We
But
spend
it's an
all-
important one,
No,
seriously.
it absolutely. So I'll answer this with two dimensions. One that is based on my family upbringing, because I think that'll resonate with so many of you. And then I'll talk a little bit about once I got to the corporate environment, some of the learnings that I've had. So, I would say that there were really three anchor things in the foundation of my upbringing. My parents immigrated to this country from Taiwan, so I'm second generation American. And there were so many life lessons that they taught my brother and I, but when I think about the key ones that have lasted throughout my life and have served as key sort of pinnacles of leadership for me, one is around education, right? We I think many of us know this, as underrepresented, underserved communities, that education is the great equalizer. And so for them, and therefore for me, the importance of education and living a life that is filled with continuous learning is absolutely foundational. And it is not necessarily about the degrees that you have or the school that you go to, but it is about having a mindset that you can always learn from every situation and every person. The second thing I would say is, I know with my parents coming here, they came here with virtually nothing. They were sponsored by a family. And if I think about their journey and their pursuit of the American dream for us, it couldn't have been done without a focus on giving back and appreciating service, right, and contribution. And so I would say that's the second tenet in terms of always having this mindset of gratitude and giving back. No matter how much or how little you have, giving of your time, giving of your talent, giving of your treasure has been a big part of my upbringing, is a big part of my leadership sort of philosophy. The third one, which I suspect many of you will very much relate to, is what I like to call immigrant paranoia. My parents lived this life and infused in me this idea that at any moment, everything could evaporate, right? It's why they reinforced education and skill set and experience, because that's the one thing in your life that you can earn that will never go away, right? Because you can earn your health, you can earn love, you can earn money and fame, but all of those things can go away like this. But who you are and your education, your skills, your experiences will never go away. This immigrant paranoia, though, that I talk about has really infused in me, and I've sort of harnessed this throughout my whole career, is that I'm always hoping for and pushing for the best outcomes, but I'm always prepared for the worst. Right? And so it is just in my DNA, whether it's a split decision conversation or a massive project or the sale of a business or a big client deal, I'm always hoping for and planning for the best, but preparing for the worst. And so any degrees of scenarios that may happen in between, we have largely thought through or have anticipated some dimension of it, right? And so that we're always kind of very agile and adaptable, but always prepared, and that may be somewhat similar to what you learned and heard from the mayor. So those are the three foundational things I would say that have been keys to my success. Then if I fast forward to my corporate experience, and Tihua, just this week I celebrated my 32nd year service anniversary with AT&T, and I'm not sure. Yeah. Remember, #Asians don't raisin. And I actually recently also announced my retirement, my upcoming retirement.
In August.
Yes, in August, right, which I like to call rewirement. So when I think about my corporate experience, I would say that for me, a big part of, if I could be so bold to say, my Asianness that has actually come in super handy is just this innate humility, right? I don't purport to be the smartest one, the most dynamic one, the most driven one in any given room. And when I hear something, or when when someone may have some kind of slur or something, let's say a bias-filled experience, I actually don't take it personally, right? And to the point of education, I take every one of these moments as an educational experience, and I don't assume malicious intent. Right? It gets to what Randall kicked us off with at the very, very beginning of this forum, which is I work super hard not to contribute to the divisiveness of any given moment. right? And I find oftentimes that when somebody is coming at you, right, whether it's in a business context or a personal context or racial context, gender context or otherwise, they are attempting to create division, right, and chaos. And I've worked really, really hard to ensure that that outcome doesn't occur. And one of the things that I always tell my team, as well as my children, is if you are at a fork in the road and you are pressured and don't really know which side to take, you always take the high road. It's the right road, every single time. And I've always said to myself from the very, very beginning, my very first job, corporate job, is that if I were ever feeling like I had to compromise my values or my principles, I would leave, right? And so having that North Star, if you will, and just really staying true to myself, my principles, my values, as well as just not taking myself too seriously. Look, I mean, the beauty of diversity is that no two of us are the same. No two of us have the same experience, the same education, the same perspective on any given contribution. It's one of the reasons why diverse teams are much more productive and actually generate better results. So I'd say those are some of the learnings too, and I would say most foundationally, my key to success has been that I have kept my focus in every role on the people. And whether that's my customers, whether that's my partners, or my people on my team, every business is a people business, and we are naive to think that organizations are anything different than that, right? Every facet of everything that we do is really ultimately all about the people. So.
How about hard work and perseverance? You clearly have a dynamic personality. You speak very well. You're loud, which is important.
Whoa, man. And, you're coming at my jersey pretty hard.
But that's, being loud, I think, in a corporate environment is not bad.
Yeah.
But also, you talking about the 5 times you got rejected, you have perseverance. So what role did perseverance and hard work play in that, and also playing corporate politics?
Yeah, absolutely. So you hit on, I'm actually an engineer by education, and so throughout my career, I've come up with these frameworks to help others and you sort of mentor next generation leaders. So perseverance is actually one of my 8 Ps of happiness and success. So absolutely, perseverance is really, really key. I'll tell you guys the story that Tihua was referring to is when I was trying to get into sales. And this was, I don't know, a couple of years into my career, and I had met a couple mentors of mine tell me, if you aspire to get into general management, you really need to go into sales. And if you look at all of the executives in the company, all of them have had sales experiences, and so if that's something you aspire to, you really need to go do that. Well, I can tell you that a second generation Taiwanese American, trained musician, engineer, all that stuff, I didn't even know what sales was, okay? My parents to this day have no idea what it is, okay? So I had no idea, right? But I was listening to these people that I respected, that I valued, and so I started interviewing for sales roles. Well, I had no sales experience. I had no customer-facing experience. I had no team management experience. So what happened? I kept getting rejected. And with each rejection, of course I went through the phases of anger and denial and sadness. But what I realized was there was something to be learned in each of those rejections, if you will. And with each rejection, I really studied, okay, who got the job and what did they have that I didn't have? And that's something I couldn't beef, right? I mean, they had skills, experiences, perhaps. And so what I did over the period of 3 years was, with every rejection, I said, okay, I didn't have that experience. I need to go get that experience so that that barrier no longer exists when I interview again. And so I did that several times over. And ultimately, on my 6th try, I actually got into sales, right? And the irony of that experience is that now, 32 years later, I've actually spent over 50% of my career in B2B sales. And if you were to speak with people who have worked with me of late, that's actually how they would know me, is as a sales leader, right? Which is, I would say, somewhat unconventional for Asian corporate professionals, right, to become sales leaders. There's just not a lot of us out there. And to your comment about politics, look, politics are just a fact of life. And I think, Tiawa, my perspective on politics really came from this one class that I took in business school at Cornell. Any Cornellians out there? No Big Red? Big Red. Big Red, okay, all right. Okay, well, all right, you're my one soul.
I'm a parent of Big Red.
Okay, parent Big Red, that's good. That's good, that's awesome. That means your money's at Big Red too. Thank you. Thank you, we appreciate it. We appreciate that. We appreciate that support. So there was this class that I took in B school that was called Power and Organizational Influences. Got an A+. Okay, so my mother would be very proud of that. But what it taught me was that all politics are organizational dynamics. And when you get people together, whether it's 2 people, 200, 2,000, 200,000, 2 million, there will always be dynamics between people. So politics can be good, or they can be bad, or they can be neutral, just like bias, right? And so politics are just a fact of life. And so the way I approached it was that it was, again, another puzzle to be solved, another dynamic needed to be managed, and that's how I worked it, right? To some degree of success, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're running out of time, so and I've only gotten to ask you one question, really. So I'm going to ask for some shorter answers, if I could. Just because the time, John, you wanted us to end at
cool.
2:30 or 2:40, okay?
You could just skip to the last question if you wanted to.
No,
no one will ever
the last
know.
question was, do you have anything to add after this? But
and in closing, I would like to say,
let me ask you
Yeah.
a more serious question.
Okay.
Not more serious, but another serious question.
Okay.
At lunch, the women at my table were talking about their fear as an Asian female in New
Yeah.
York City. Anti-Asian hate, which increased 200% in New York City and 338% in the country as a whole in the last couple of years, has now seemed to be focused on Asian women.
Yep.
And it was focused on Asian seniors. It still is to a degree, but now mainly Asian women. How do you think the U.S. corporate world should be responding, and how can the business world help dealing with anti-Asian hate?
Yeah, thank you for asking this, because this is a very, very important question, and it's a very, very important moment that we need to learn from and move forward from. So first of all, I want to say that I'm completely outraged at what is happening. It's actually hard for me to contain my emotion on this topic. I wrote a piece for Fortune back at the end of April about this exact topic. So it's very top of mind for me. So what each of us as leaders must do, whether we're in the public sector, private sector, or nonprofit sector, or otherwise, is that we have an obligation to create an environment of safety for our people, okay? And that is both physical safety as well as psychological safety. And I think we are at a momentous time in our history because we get, right, what 9/11 did was raise consciousness about physical safety, right? We now have different barriers, different things in terms of how we travel, in terms of processes and procedures, but the understanding, appreciation for, and empathy for, and compassion for psychological safety is still not fully understood, right? As an Asian female myself, I will tell you, and I wrote this in that Fortune article, that I will not ride the New York subway again. For a tri-state area girl, that's a pretty significant statement.
Who also does boxing as well.
Yeah. But I won't, right? I won't. And it makes me sad to say that, but the reality is because of perceptions about Asian women, about being weak and not fighting back and being demure and quiet and whatnot, that adds to how easy of a target we are, right? And so I feel that the responsibility of business leaders and leaders of all kinds is that, one, we need to seek to learn about the emotional toll and the psychological toll that this is taking on people's mental health, right, first and foremost. I think we also owe our teams whatever it is that we can do to provide support for them. So let's talk on the physical safety side. Are there buddy systems for commuting that are established that are not just for the Asian community or Asian women, but for all of your team members, if you will, right? Let's use this moment to make sure that all of our employees and our team members are safe, right? Are there sufficient support mechanisms if someone is going through a personal crisis and needs to talk to somebody, right? Do you have support for them in the source of a hotline 7x24 so that they know that they can be supported in a very private, but yet very personal way, right? So I feel that business leaders have to look at what resources that they can provide, but if they don't fully quite understand the depth of the issue and the depth of the impact, that's where they got to start, right? They got to get groups of their team members together to just have this conversation of what's it mean, for you to be an Asian female now. How do you feel about this, right? What are the things that we can do to support you? And that's where I think every bit of progress begins, is in a conversation.
What about business pressuring elected officials?
Business pressuring elected officials?
If you were in New York and you were a CEO here, would you be calling the mayor up or the governor and saying, hey, listen, you've got to do something. My employees are scared. Should business leaders be doing that in New York or anywhere in the country?
Yeah. Well, look, I have always taken a very collaborative approach to every imperative initiative and aspect of business. And so I believe that when the public and private sector collaborate, great things can happen. Right? I mean, we can look at, one of the things that AT&T is, we are the sole provider of FirstNet, which is all about providing support to our first responders, which came directly out of the 9/11 Commission, right? And so this collaboration we have with the federal government around the services we provide for first responders is transforming, right, the way that we are being protected, right? Whether it's our police, our fire, our military.
And that is where the first responders have first access to the use of the wireless calls.
Right, exactly, right? So they have a dedicated service, specifically for them, their kind of own highway. And so I believe that there is lots of collaboration opportunity, for us now as we take a lot of the learnings post-COVID. We're working to close the digital divide, right? One of the things that we've learned and has been talked about already in this forum is that how COVID widened many gaps that already existed, right? Whether it's education, income, or health oriented in our communities were more greatly impacted by that. So I believe that collaboration is the answer, right? I don't know that I would use the word pressure personally, right? I think that collaboration is always a better answer.
Okay. It probably would have more success too than my attitude of pressuring people. But when in the Congress, there are three caucuses I'm aware of that I spoke to. They are the Black Caucus, the Asian Caucus, and the Latino Caucus, and or Latinx Caucus. And they didn't speak to each other very much. They didn't cooperate until Donald Trump was elected. After Donald Trump was elected, they suddenly realized they needed allyship. They should have spoken to you, John, earlier. But so they began to unite after that. In terms of allyship within the corporate world, within the business world, and disagree or correct me if I'm wrong here, if you don't agree with what I'm going to say here, but to me as a reporter, when I look at the allyship in the corporate world, I see it even among journalists, that many African Americans and Latino Americans and Native Americans, we all helped each other because we face similar problems and we realize that we can help each other. In the corporate world, I see also, and also in journalism, there's, as well as allyship, there's competition. At the community level, what I see between the communities is predominantly racism toward each other, of every community toward each other, toward every other community, and a lot of misunderstanding, hate, and really no knowledge of each other, nor a desire for knowledge. As a corporate CEO, how would you deal? You notice how I start with the easy question and we went a little harder and harder. How would you deal with the allyship and the corporate level versus what you would do on the community level from a business point of view, not as an elected official? That's my next question, whether you're going to run for office. But anyway.
The answer, I'll take that one first, sir,
Sure.
and the answer would be no.
Okay.
Super easy.
That's
Okay.
too bad. I think you'd make a good elected official.
I have been told that.
Do you
but the
guys
answer
think
is
she'd make a good elected official? Anyway, go ahead.
okay. See, now I forgot the question. So no. Okay. Okay. So first of all, in terms of collaboration and allyship across the communities,
Corporate level and
community level
street level
and
yeah,
street
community
level, community level.
right.
Okay. So at the corporate level, there is no question that allyship is key. All right. From an AT&T standpoint, I'll give you a couple of examples, and I'll tell you one thing that I specifically did to emulate and actually take action around it. So we have over 24 employee groups, right? And for the longest time, each of these employee groups, whether they were focused on Gen Y or the Asian community, the Filipino community, the Black community, Latin community, the veterans, whatnot, they would go do their own thing and say, hey, they'd have their own banquet, they'd ask for the same set of executives to come speak and sponsor, have their own mentoring programs, their own fundraising programs for the community and whatnot. What we did in terms of coalition building at AT&T was we pulled them all together and we said the company will sponsor and support one national conference for all employee groups. We'll help subsidize that. And it has become one of the hallmark weekends of the company every single year. Right? We've been doing it now for over 10 years. It's been over a decade since we pulled all of them together to say we need to work together. We're all interested in very similar topics, right? Access to leaders, the ability to contribute, development programs and whatnot. And so we'll work together to create a format and a forum where everyone's coming together as opposed to saying, no, I want you in Denver, no, I want you in Boston, I want you in New York, and it's the same set of people and resources they're tapping into. Okay, so that's one example.
And it's popular among the AT&T employees?
It sells out, right? So, I mean, employees have to, it's on their own time and on their own dime, and it sells out. It's the hottest ticket in the company. Last time it sold out, before we went virtual, of course, because virtual, sold out in 14 minutes. It is the hottest ticket, in town to come to this national conference. One example that I implemented, and I'm really, really proud of this. This is one of my greatest legacies as I wind down here with AT&T is I noticed the silos between the women of color. Okay, so I long admired the strength of my Black women colleagues and the strength of the Black sisterhood. Same thing in terms of the Latina sisterhood, and then of course I as part of the Asian women community. But I felt like there was an opportunity to pull everybody together. So something that I worked with our company's leadership team to do so. And we developed our own very specific women of color program and initiative and support structure and have run hundreds of women and their supervisors through it, addressing topics like emotional tax, how do you become a better mentor and supporter for women of color? And there were very many commonalities across those communities. So it absolutely can be and needs to be done without sacrificing the uniqueness of each of the individual communities, right? I think that's one of the dangers that we always have to be mindful of is creating new silos when we forego other ones, right? Okay. Now at the ground level, to your question and comment and your observation about competition or bias or what
flat out racism.
Flat out racism. Okay.
And you can disagree with my interpretation.
Yeah.
If you do. It's
Yeah,
fine.
yeah. So what I disagree with is the generalization that you're making. Okay. So I do not like to deal in absolutes because I don't believe there are any. Right. I don't think that we can say always or never, or this is our observation about this community as a whole, right, at the ground level. So I disagree with that. What I do agree with is that, and this is part of actually a book that I co-authored, is that we all have bias. To be human is to have bias. We have conscious bias and we have unconscious bias, okay? And part of the opportunity of where we are at this moment in time to move forward together is an opportunity to more deeply understand the biases that we have, right? That are in fact driving our behaviors and our words and our actions, right? But we have to start with ourselves here before we can expect any of the others around us to move forward, right? And this ties to my earlier point about humility, right? And about collaboration. Each of us have biases that were shaped by our upbringing, where we come from, the media we consume, the people we hang out with, right? And these biases are always in evolution, and it's a totally normal thing. It's neuroscience, right? It's just what our brain does. But knowing that this is what it means to be human is to have bias, we have to work harder at dissecting that, right? And this ties to an earlier point that I made to you, Tihua, which is I try not to assume malicious intent, because if you assume malintent, you then go at it with a position of defense and attack, as opposed to, you know what, maybe this person is calling me Oriental because they actually don't know that that word went out in the 90s or why, right? Okay, this has happened, all right? Maybe this person is asking me where I'm really, really from, and where I'm really, really from, because they don't realize that by asking that question, it implies that I don't belong here. Right? So I take that moment and then I take them through this ringer of where are you really, really from? And then I say, well, oh, you mean my ethnicity, right? That's what you really meant, right? I take that moment as an educational moment, as opposed to thinking that that person actually intended to be racist, right, or offensive. And I really believe that change can happen one person, one conversation at a time, because it has throughout all of history. So I don't subscribe to that, right? I don't think that I think we are better than that. In fact, I know we are better than that. But it takes a moment, it takes a pause, it takes an ability for us to introspectively examine ourselves and really open our minds and our hearts to others so that we can actually learn from each other and come together. And isn't that what allyship is all about?
How would you do that at the community level, in a business? And should business do that?
What do you mean? Should business do that?
Well, you're talking about allyship,
Yeah.
and you're talking about learning to deal with biases.
Yeah.
How should a business do that for the community level, or only within its organization, within the company, or should it expand that to the community?
Well, I think it all gets to the mission of what a particular business is all about, right? I mean, if you have a business that's focused on coalition building, then it becomes part of their mission, right? If you have a business that's focused on delivering food to the community, is it part of their mission to go and extend to do that? And so I think it largely depends, right? I mean, I feel that every organization has an obligation to its employees, of course, right? Its customers, of course, and the communities in which you live, work, and play. Now, how that commitment manifests itself comes in many different ways, right? And so, again, if I use AT&T as an example, our business is about connections. It's about connectivity. It's about enabling our communities with, broadband connections, right? And so that happens to be our focus, right? So we are setting up all around the country community learning centers, right, where those who don't have access to broadband can go and learn, right, and have access, right? And we also, there's an aspect of also supporting the youth, right, in these communities who require broadband services to learn.
Given that a lot of the anti-Asian hate, I believe, is a result of COVID and a result of Donald Trump doing the Kung Flu stuff, when the President of the United States says things like that, if China and the U.S., hopefully it'll become like the Yankees and the Boston Red Sox and just become competitors. But if it gets worse than that, this country has a history of internment. There are 24 million Asian Americans now, so it's hard to get rid of 24 million people. But I'm wondering whether corporations should be thinking about, and not just Asians, but all corporate leaders should be thinking about, what will we do in this situation if it happens? If you were, CEO in charge still, and this were to happen, do you care, do you have any ideas or thoughts of what you would do to deal with that, or would you deal with it at all?
Yeah, so I'm not going to hypothesize on that scenario of scenarios of scenarios. I want to tie, though, back, because I think what you're raising is a point about the market, right? The global marketplace. Okay. And I want to tie it back to something that you said in our prior repartee here. And that is, look, we all exist in a marketplace, in a community that's evolving, right? And those of us that are Americans, we are living within America, in an America that is changing very heavily in terms of demographics, right? It gets to this minority majority, or majority minority, whichever way we're talking about it. So when you think about business, right, and of whatever kind, whether you're in tech or in retail or in financial services or otherwise, you are striving to serve a market, right? And it is incumbent upon you to determine and understand how that market is evolving, whether it's domestically or globally, right? And serving businesses of all shapes and sizes around the world, China is a really important market to many of my clients, right? And so what business leaders are compelled to do is ensure that they understand the dynamics of the markets that they're striving to serve, how that relates to the business, and how that relates to what is needed in terms of relationships, from a governmental perspective, right? To ensure, and this is why the Business Roundtable exists, right? The Business Roundtable is a group of CEOs from major companies all around the country, that provide insight and advice to the White House and others, right? I mean, they gather and they talk about where business needs to go and what this country needs and whatnot, right? And so again, this to me is more about collaboration between the public sector and the private sector. And I don't think that we can be naive in thinking that this is a binary, right? That any scenario would yield a binary outcome, right? I don't disagree with you that the environment of Asian hate has been catalyzed by divisive language and divisive behaviors. The only way out of that is to not do that and have more inclusive behaviors and inclusive actions and inclusive leadership across and within organizations, across sectors, and across communities. Again, leading to, that's what allyship is all about.
And allyship is good for business, and
Yes.
U.S.-China cooperation, economic cooperation would be good for business as well, I think. I've been told to wrap up, so you have to answer these very quickly, if you don't mind. Last two questions. How would you work this conference if you were working it here and not speaking? In other words, if you were one of the young people in this audience,
okay.
how would you work this conference? What would you be doing during the breaks, et cetera?
I just told you guys now I spent half my career in sales, so this won't be a surprise. I'd be working to meet some new people. I'd be consciously giving myself a metric. Okay. And at each break to meet X number of people.
Oh,
right?
Actually have a number.
Yeah, I would have a number in my head.
What number would you have here, you think?
Depends on the length of the break. So.
Okay, 15-minute breaks coming up.
At least 3, maybe 5.
3, 5. Whoa, okay.
All right, but the key thing though, Tiawa, is the follow-up, right? So the key thing is not just the swapping of LinkedIns here and the cards or whatever that you guys are doing, right, in the break. It's the, I really resonated with this person, right? We really hit it off. I'm gonna follow up with them in a week and just pop them a note and see, if they're interested in striking up a deeper conversation than a break can allow, and maybe we build a relationship from that, right?
Great. Last question. Is there anything you want to add I did not ask you?
You're awesome, man.
No. Wait. Before you go, Ren, if you don't mind, honestly, that's I get the best answers from that question.
Yeah.
Honestly, if there's anything that I did not ask you think it's important for this group to know.
Yes, absolutely. So what I would say to all of you is this, is that you can be and do and create anything that you want as leaders, okay? Leadership is a choice. You do not need to wait for anybody to give you permission to lean in, to create allyship, to collaborate, to build relationships, and you need to go do it, right? You need to surround yourself with people that lift you up, people that you can learn from. And what I would say too, and this goes a little bit against sort of my Asian grain, is you got to get uncomfortable. Because if you are too comfortable, whether it's in the personal dimensions of your life or the professional dimensions of your life, it means that you're not growing and you're not learning. So I would challenge you to get uncomfortable personally, learn about communities, learn about issues that maybe are unfamiliar to you, and keep growing, right? Keep growing and keep going. Okay?
You're ready for 60 minutes now.
Because there was just wisdom all on this stage. Do your thing. We can multitask. Give of your talent, time, and treasure. Collaboration is the answer. The beauty of diversity is no two of us are the same. Change can happen one person at a time. As leaders, we must seek to learn about the emotional toll and support we can provide for our teams. Ann got an A+ in organizational dynamics. And if I had to distill my takeaway from this last fireside chat with no fire, it would be, I wrote down visionary, inclusive leadership for Ann Chow. That's what I wrote down for Ann Chow. Visionary, inclusive leadership. And she punctuated that when she said leadership is a choice. I've never heard that before, but that will remain with me from this fireside chat. For one more round of applause for Ann Chow. We're gonna miss her. Please don't retire. Run for office. Don't go. Please don't go. All right.